you know, because it's an open air way, you know, for obtaining knowledge and everything. But going back to the church again, because I mean, I asked a question to a colleague of ours, and asked him what was going on in this political climate, and sad to say, their own comment was about the food bank at the time. I'm like, okay, I mean, but that's all we're looking at this time, and, you know, because my question was leading to what are we doing as parishioners and as churches to kind of galvanize ourselves, and where's the collusion for us working together, because there's going to be much more blowout and everything. We need to be looking at how our educational system, what we're going to be doing with schools and everything, and we're small bodies of churches, I mean, and everything, and so we need to be having collaboration about what's our moves. But I think we wait too much on what we're waiting on the system, this system, which is the wheels are coming off for us as United States. They're coming out, but we're looking at a world coming to an end. In the sense that we know of. So what is that? So that's where the church comes in again to me, and what our role and what we do, because you got to be able to survive. You got to have systems in place. This man, we don't have banks, we don't have grocery markets. We don't have these things that are set up. I remember when COVID happened and everything, and we scrambled around. I talked to you, I called you and everything, and I was talking about our churches, black churches that were struggling. You know, you was in a situation that COVID had no effect, but not on your bank account. Where you was established at that time. You was in Carolina and Charlotte and everything. That is predominantly white church. Right. You know, we don't have endowments. Right. You know, things like that. I mean, basic things that we need to go back and really and be teaching up and down. I mean, the last time I went to a convention, it's been a while, and everything since I came. I think I was down there in Tampa, and Jasper Wisdom was doing a class on hooping. I mean, the hell. I mean, we do all the things we need to be teaching. We got classes on hooping. I don't know how much they employ. I ain't been in a while, so I don't know what's going on this side. Most people now, every time I ask, old friends, they hadn't been a part of it a while themselves, and they still pastor. I'm not pastor at the time, so I mean, I don't know what's taking place.
It's rooted in theology. How we understand theology shows up in what we do in the community, right? If we think our main job is to get people in heaven, to get souls into heaven, we're going to spend a lot less time building systems, as you say, on earth to help people live. I want to go back to when you talk about mind consciousness or Christ consciousness and all of that. I think Matthew 22:37 is very important. Jesus said, when we talk about what's the greatest commandment,
these two things, my last two dollars.
He said these two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. And so he said that's the purpose of the church: love God, love God, love people, and make disciples. And what are you making disciples to do? To love God, love people. Now those are radical things. When you talk about loving God, because to love God is to love the things of God. When you love the things of God, that's justice, that's mercy, that's liberation. And it includes building the systems you're talking about. Building systems where the elderly don't have to choose between medicine, right, and paying their bills or all kinds of things, or in a situation where we have limited affordable housing. What are we doing to make sure people have places to stay? What are we doing to give scholarships so kids can matriculate and not come out of college with $200,000 of debt? And you can just go down the list. It's so many things, those systems that we need to build. But I want to go back to loving God with your mind, because too often in the church we denigrate the mind. We're held hostage to theology. First of all, we didn't even create. A fish doesn't know it's in water, and too many black churches don't know that their theology comes out of the sort of like America, right? That has created a kind of theology that serves the wealthy, rich white men. And if you don't interrogate that, if you don't love God with your mind, if you don't value that part, you can't deconstruct those theologies that are bringing harm to our community. And we keep doing the same thing over and over. That's why you might have a class on Hoover, or that's why a convention may invest more time in those churchy kind of things rather than practical kind of things that will help our people in their daily lives. I think it starts with the theology. And that's why I do so much work in theology, because when I encounter people in terms of why we're not doing this, why we're not doing this, why we don't do this, because they truly believe at the bottom of it that the job of the church is to get people to heaven. There's two choices, heaven or hell, right? And so we had to deconstruct this whole thing about hell. That this idea, because what hell prevents us from loving people correctly. In other words, we're afraid we're going to go to hell if we veer from the text, if we think differently from what we taught, or if we think we're questioning God. You can't love people, right?
I push back on that because that's a New Testament thought. I mean, that wasn't an Old Testament thought.
Well, that's the point, but everybody believes it.
Yeah.
It wasn't Old Testament. Sheol, that was not, those is the great, shadowy afterlife or something. It had nothing to do with eternal punishment.
Right.
But we consider ourselves New Testament people. So people embrace. I'll tell you a story. And I can tell you this from my personal experience.
Okay.
And remember, none of us are free until all of us are free. So I remember a reporter asking me a question about the gay community. Because I believed in hell and that they were going to hell. It made me unable to love them properly. So, and I said, well, I personally don't have any problem with it. I said, but I have to be honest with them. If I love them, I have to tell them the truth of the gospel. That if they don't get right and change their ways, they're going to hell. There are so many people who believe that. And that's a distorted and deformed understanding of love to force people. I'm going to tell you real quick. I love the Wesleyan quadrilateral. And what the Wesleyan quadrilateral is a methodology of interpreting the Bible. It says you use scripture, right? We use scripture. We take scripture seriously. You use tradition, what the tradition has said about things, but you also use reason and experience. Reason and experience. Reason, philosophy, biology, science, so on and so on.
You think philosophy, they push back because they think that's talking about stuff. But the philosophy is really a way of talking things through and thinking things
I
through.
emphasize the thinking part. You can go with your mind.
Right.
Experience. How do things work for us experientially, right? We can see through our experience how certain things have not worked. And God is saying you can use those things to help you interpret the Bible. Jesus said, you have heard it said, but I say that's permission for us to reinterpret texts that harm and restructure them in ways that bring life, love, and liberty. And so that's the part of love about your mind. If you don't deconstruct the mental part, it's hard to get to the other part because so many of us are held captive by theology that tells us the most important thing you can do is to save somebody's soul for heaven in an afterlife. And what that does, it makes you complacent about this life. Therefore, as long as you're captivated by that theology, you're not going to start building the systems on earth to make people's lives more livable and in a way that they can thrive.
Well, I mean, I think in visiting with you on yesterday, the Dr.
Brunel Anderson,
outstanding job on yesterday, dealt with trauma.
Yeah.
And that's a process.
Absolutely.
Of having us to go back. Most people, that opens some people's eyes to know that you still traumatized.
Yeah.
I was dealing with a family member earlier this week. And they were coming from a thing of trauma.
Yeah.
And everything. Old trauma. And everything. And I didn't handle it well. Everything. But I realized, and I realized that even within that context of the sermon, that we don't have a system in place with that. We do have these people out there like you who are able to help with those systems, but we don't tap into those persons too often. And in a way, we don't have people.
We have so much trauma. Dr. Dick Ruth told us on that post-traumatic slave syndrome. there's trauma in our bones, the epigenetic effects of trauma and all of that, and that has to be dealt with. And then
what's the house when you battle wet, when the women get banned, they still want to stay in the house with the man still beating on them.
Yeah,
What's that, the battle wife syndrome?
Yeah, battle wife syndrome,
Yeah,
codependency.
Yeah.
There's another term, I forget the name of it, that describes that as well.
And but it's so clear with the take away of voting rights and how they're trying to turn the clock back and the things that we're talking. Why are we still looking and waiting on them to change?
So I think Dr. King said attack the cause and heal the effect. So I think it's both ends. I believe realistically, we can't afford not to challenge systems and challenge government to do and behave and operate like it should. But if that's all we do, we'll always come up short. So we have to build our own systems as well. Systems of liberation, systems of economics that serve our people uniquely. Right. But at the same time, we have to, also fight against a rogue government, MAGA extremism, Trump fascism. We have to vote. We have to participate in civics and voting for harm reduction and all of that. I think it's both and. We have to build our own communities. I used to say the white man may have knocked you down, but it's foolish to expect him to pick you up. But Dr. King also taught us, I can't force you to love me, but I can get you to pass laws so that you won't kill me, right? And we see some limitations in that. And what's going on right now in America, you always have this white backlash when you see this tremendous black progress. That started from Reconstruction. After Reconstruction, blacks and whites were working together, and the Klan rose and all of that. You see it after the Civil Rights Movement, and now you see it after the election of Barack Obama. We had a black man at the helm of the government. Then we had a sister who was vice president. It was too much. Coupled with the fact that whites would be the statistical minority very soon. They feel like they're losing their country. And so they fight back with ferocity, right? Because they're afraid of losing their country. And so they want to make sure, even when there's the statistical minority, that they still have all the power. They want apartheid. That's what they want. They want apartheid. And the apartheid, you know what happened? It was a minority of whites controlling the whole black population.
And that's not going to happen again. And they might
it's
happening, but that's not.
Let me tell you why I don't want to say it won't happen again. Because we never thought Trump would get elected because he was a buffoon. He was a clown. But he was a useful idiot for white supremacists to get what they want. And look, Project 2025, all this stuff is happening. They are flooding our cities with the military, right? ICE has got so much power. They have hauled back on so many rights. Right now, they're attacking voting rights. That if they win, if the Supreme Court sides with them, half of the black congressional caucus could be gone. So what they're fighting rogue. They're not following the rule book, like the kind of gentle Republicans who were still racist, right? They were racist, but they were kind of gentle. They believed in going a little slow about it, but they were like, that's not working. We got to just come out of the closet and undo all of these things. So if we sit around in churches hooping, I'm not against hooping. Hooping is fine, but if that's all you're doing, that's the problem. Hooping is not a problem. But if that's all you do, if you're being entertained to death, that's the problem, right?
Well, I mean, our Bible studies, usher boards, all these different type of media.
They're not focused on the right thing.
Okay, and that's the problem. Education is our problem and everything. And my question is, across the board. I mean, we still we battle ecumenical now for how we reach out to other groups and everything. And regardless of the struggle for who we are and our freedom and justice is a struggle for all, and everything. We're people who come here have lived on the backs of what we've established and what we've done. My problem is that when we look at our religious lives and everything, while we're not really more comfortable and more engaged in working across the line with our Muslim brothers.
Yeah,
That's right. I mean,
because we thought they're gonna have.
well, I mean, and that's I mean, and for that, well, that's probably that's a misteaching
Absolutely.
and everything. So those are things that
Jesus said, other sheep
yeah,
I have.
yeah,
You know.
that's not of this flock,
Right.
you know. You know, and so I mean, some texts we we need to just go back and just look at. I don't want to jump around too much, but I think about, you know, he said greater things that I do, you should do
I love that
also.
verse.
I love that, you know, and everything, because he did some powerful things. So we need him, so we need to take out, stop being so literal
Right.
in the sense and know and understand what that means. Now, another text we are meeting was in Rome, I think it's Revelation 29. Satan has deceived the whole world.
Yeah, and that's true.
Yeah, that's a discussion. And how in every level and everything, every facet of it, including the church.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we're in the world. So
I said it's easier to trick somebody than to convince them that they've been tricked.
Correct.
And that's one of the things we grapple with in the church. We don't want to think that what we've been believing for centuries is wrong. I never forget Yvette Flounder talked to her about her mother when she was talking about her mother about the rich theology and all that. Her mother was like, I think was 80 years old. And all of a sudden she got quiet and stopped talking. And when she found out what was happening, yeah, no, I don't. When she found out what was happening, her mother said, it's just so hard for me to believe that all the stuff I believed for these decades was wrong. And that makes me sad. And that's one of the biggest barriers. And that's for people to accept the fact that a lot of things that we have, like you said, the whole world. If we understand that verse, it may be easier for us to accept the fact that we've been tricked. It doesn't mean you throw everything out.
No, you have to throw the baby out with the bath.
Right.
You know, and everything. But we need to, and the thing is, we can have sidebar conversations, you know, and everything, but we still say we can't say to the parishioners. That's not me. And I think that's why dialogue needs to be created, because you need small groups with and think tank. We have never been taught. We've never been taught to think critically.
Yeah.
You know, we've been taught what to believe. We ain't been taught how to think.
There you go. And that is the problem of the church. And that's why I love that verse. You got to love God with your mind. Your mind. Be a critical thinker. Don't check your head, you know, at the door of the church. Bring all of that in and allow God to use your mind as well as everything else. But we've denigrated the mind. A thought came to me, and being 61, sometimes it slips your mind. But it comes back.
Okay, well, let's slide up. We'll talk about the system and some things we need, and we're really talking about the same thing. But let's talk about what this liberation theology is, because that's where a lot of I'm not there. What I was about to say, a lot of preachers, I have sidebar, and I'm sidebars with. You know, I say how I feel, what's on my mind about things, and they know things and don't believe certain things, but they still leave their parishioners.
Oh, thank you.
This dialogue, this is what this platform is about.
Yeah.
I want some of those things. So I wanted it to be a dialogue with it to help people to start thinking about what they say they believe. And
do you know why a lot of preachers refuse to teach certain things? A couple of reasons. I wrote a post on Facebook. I said a lot of preachers refuse to rethink their theology because they believe that congregations will rethink calling them. So that's right. In other words, if you unconsciously, most people are not going to say, well, I'm trying to protect my job, but unconsciously, one preacher actually admitted that to me, but unconsciously it works in the background and keeps us timid about shaking things up, because once we start shaking things up, we don't know what I get preaching engagements, and all of these things work in the background, so we will go along to get along. So you're right, some of these preachers in their training, they have been exposed to these ideas,
That's correct.
but they're not sexy. They don't go to church. They don't hoop. You know what I'm saying? You know, and all of that. And you start teaching this stuff. You start situations where you need. I mean, you really need that. You don't know what. You know, you got kids in college, right? You got a mortgage to pay for. You got a car to pay for. You got we're protecting our job security often and our popularity sometimes. So that
And,
don't call it
at the expense.
on his podcast before he was pastor. Accept Christ, you're not going to hell, all that kind of stuff. Man, the community, the church community turned against him. You heretic and so on and so on. This is a hot preach. And
He went back.
he went back. Far too often that people are afraid. I think we have to
Right.
you know, he regained things, but he lost his church because he dared to rethink some concepts about the Bible.
Right.
You know, and this whole universalism, but I agree with his interpretation of hell. Right. I just think I define the afterlife differently. That because if Trump and oppressors that makes God an oppressor. You know, was it William A. Jones? I think is God a white racist? You know,
What is it? What is this liberation theology? Because to me, because liberation is about freeing yourself,
Right.
and everything, and it's all about changing the. When I look at some of James Cone is probably one I find is black theologian. When I look at some of their things, their bodies of work and everything, I want to know where it went. I mean, and the practice of it and everything, because that's what I'm double backing on something else. Keep me on point. But that's a problem with what I have Black history was, is that we take these small bit that money, but we never study a body of work. And that's where we have some we can do well in educating ourselves. We have bodies of work out there, frameworks. I don't even know why people like Dr. Claude Anderson for building your economic profile. For through churches and so forth. People like that this is what has happened. What we preachers have done and churches have done, they separated academics from church for a moment. Kind of like in that era, you wanted to watch what you was reading, and you kind of you weren't getting into more too deep a conversation with theological debates in our group doing that. And some had grown.
Intellectualism will not save us. Black liberation theology is a movement that interprets the Bible through the lived experience of Black people, Black and oppressed people. In a nutshell, that's all Black liberation theology is.
Okay.
His book actually came after James Cone. James Cone's book came in 1969, And that's really it, you know, a movement that really interprets about the lived experience. Is on the side of the oppressed. In a nutshell, that's what Black liberation theology is. And it's an interesting history because if that's the formal definition, the formal movement. James Cone, the Black liberation theology before James Cone, you know, slave religion, or if you look at someone, then Martin Beasley, you know, the Gabriel Prosser. The way Christianity flourished in the African American or the Black community, put Christianity in conversation with some African religions early on. I think one historian said we'll never know how much came spaceships and into the colonies with our people early on. And so I think early on we had more of a robust resistance theology. The Hushabas, right?
Okay.
You know, if you look at the Negro spiritual, and all those songs that were sending, you know, cryptic messages.
Wade in the water.
Right. Well, yeah. And so that's the beginning of liberation theology.
Right.
James Cone became more accommodationist and more conservative. Because what happens? The more progress you see, sometimes the more complacent you get. And so some of that started disappearing. Some of the sort of Black theology, the resistance and all of that. Leaders and others in the Black preaching prophetic tradition existed before James Cone. So James and was it Black Power? Was it? I wrote it down because for some reason I'm missing. Not I want the formal name of it. That was his first book. It's 1960. I used this list when I was in 1969. And so, in a nutshell, that's what Black theology is. It said, you know, he argued that of, you know, particularity, right? He was an Afro-Asiatic Jewish. That's his particularity. You can't divorce him from that. We tried to. The white churches divorced him from that, made everything spiritual. But that was his lived experience. It's released the Roman Empire and all of that and sided with the poor. That's why he said, as much as you do the least of these, you do it unto me. You know, he wasn't just poor figuratively, he was poor and in an oppressed situation physically. And so that's what God identified.
Dr. James Small, he
I
often
remember him.
often quotes. He said, "If you know your history, when liberation theology, I guess when I struggle with it in a sense. I know what you how you explain, but at the same time, the truth. Oh, I mean, I don't know if it's another way of telling the story, or we have time just exposing truth to what it is, where it is.
I think we're exposing truth. That we're making it up. if we read the Bible itself, Jesus, of course, was born under a system of oppression. He was crucified because he was irreverent, because he challenged empire. You know, we have turned that story just into a spiritual one of that he died for our sins and all of that. You know, we read the stories, you know,
right.
Jesus was born. That's why they tried to kill him as a youth, because Herod was terrified of this other so-called king who being born here. He had to flee to Egypt to avoid being murdered by Herod.
Okay, because we can go so many places with that. Was it Gutierrez?
Yeah,
Gustavo. Liberation, and after political liberation, and then the liberation from sin, and everything.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what liberation. Theologist, anthropology, it's theology, it's
that you go to the root of self of who we are.
Yeah.
And where we are, and with our origin. And
yeah.
So it's so much out there. I mean, that we're still distorted.
Yeah.
That we. I kind of laugh at the thing of what books they trying to take out of these different schools. Yeah. Just, you know, educate them, right, and just our own self education.
Yeah.
So we have a ways to go, but I still say the challenge is for the church to make this.
Right. Souls, but their bodies. That is, I think, the warp and woof of the gospel, the end all be all. Politics is not an add-on, justice is not an add-on to the gospel, it is the gospel. And until we understand that, we will continue to to make our people complacent, placate them with this kind of sky theology, what Dr. Flunder calls passivity producing eschatology. You know, that this whole notion that our primary aim is for heaven makes us passive on the earth. And that has been the problem. That's been the problem for far too long. Right. You know, some people believe that, we can turn, the pulpit into a political platform. You know, if you're talking about Democrat, Republican, electoral politics, no, the gospel is above all of that. That's the definition of politics. Right. But that's not the definition. That's not the definition of what we're dealing with. Politics is really the way resources are passed out, right? And so when we're talking about politics, we're talking about systems of power. And the Bible has something to say about that. The church has something to say about systems of power and the distribution of resources.
When we look at it, and we got to close. I mean, you don't have to come back and join me.
I'd love to.
But when we look at the various characters of the Bible, David and the different kings of Old Testament, these weren't just mere men. They were running kingdoms.
Yeah.
I mean, they had armies. So when we use them in the context we use them, we don't think about the what they was really over and encounter. I mean, we
reduce them, right?
Yeah. We reduce them to just a mere thought of a past,
We want to spiritualize it, rather than look at the, lived reality and political structures and the implications of the time in which they lived, which was under a political, he was.
That's what I love about the nation. I'm not going. That's what I like about the Nation of Islam. and how they operate. I've followed the nation for years. And everything. I never joined, didn't feel to have the need of joining. I used to.
We learn,
Yeah,
we should learn from everybody.
we can learn from
We
everybody.
can learn from everybody, you know, and I think that's
But
what
I
you
love
need.
those brothers and everything.
Yeah.
I support them in a lot of.
Yeah, no question about it. You know, I was executive director of an interfaith organization. So we had members, we had Islam, you know, we had Muslims, Hindus, Baha'i, Sikh, you name it.
Okay.
You know, we had that. So I believe in the cross-pollination of theological religious ideas. Other faith traditions should be honored. And we can learn so much from them. I think it made us as Christians to interact with people from other faith traditions. I love the golden rule of Islam. It says, no one has truly believed until they wish for the other what they wish for themselves. That's a simple but powerful statement. You haven't even believed unless you wish for your neighbor what you wish for yourself. Yeah.
That's powerful. When you come back, I want to dig into that Nicene Creed.
Oh yeah, we can talk about all those creeds.
Yeah, we can talk about those things because that kind of unpacks in the folks how we look at the church and how we look at Christ. I listen to some preachers; they quick to say, "Well, you know, Christianity in Africa, you know." But if you knew that and everything, you need to know what the Coptic Church believes versus what you talking about. You preaching and believing here.
Yeah.
So I mean, don't just use that as a throwback.
Yeah.
When you're not going back to see what did they believe, what did they teach. So I like to get into some of that.
Sure,
You know,
I love to.
Next,
those creeds are important to understand, and it teaches us how they solidify certain doctrines that we think were just, you know, dropped from the sky by God, but they were formulated by people in the room saying, well, the church should believe. And they were interpreting scripture, yes, but they were interpreted from a particular perspective.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's correct.
Well, let's do it again.
Dr. Robinson, I appreciate you having me on the Chaplain's Podcast.
I love it, the Chaplain's Podcast.
The Chaplain's Podcast. I named the Chaplain's Podcast because I wanted to go across all groups. When I served as a Navy chaplain, I don't just serve Baptist people.
Right.
I serve everyone.
Absolutely.
And everything. So that's why I named the Chaplain's Podcast because it's a server of all people.
That's a probably good name, brother.
All right. Thanks. Thanks
for having me.
Good to have you, my brother. Peace be unto you all. We'll see you on the next Chaplain Podcast. Have a great day. Thank you, Brother Gary.
All right.
I know you got to get home to it.